Hello and welcome to the Cup of Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors, Team Oxygen Addict.
Online triathlon coaching featuring event-specific training plans and coaching guidance from Rob Wilby.
And I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Helen Murray. Helen, how are you doing today?
Rob, I'm very, very well, thank you. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. I've been out for a nice run this morning in the rain, which was great. Been sitting around writing training plans all day, listening to music. Life is good, Helen.
What's on the playlist, Rob? When you're writing training plans, what's on the playlist?
Just upgraded Spotify. It's a whole new world of music opened up to me.
Wow.
I've probably not listened to any new music in about, 5 years, 8 years.
Yep.
Going through with one of the Spotify radio stations, just liking stuff that comes on and then checking out new artists. So John Mayer's the latest one for me at the minute. Have you heard much by him?
No.
Love it. Absolutely brilliant.
Is it good for sort of writing training plans too?
It is, it's excellent. You wouldn't like it for the turbo though.
Okay.
Singer-songwritery type stuff.
Oh, cool.
When you're trying to hammer out an FTP session.
I might look into that later. I keep on getting on the turbo, and I'm like, right, I'm a bit bored of my playlist now. And then I go to the Mexican radio station, which just always brings up Mexican cheesy pop, and I'm like, yep, happy days. I'm all right now.
I'm imagining, like, how do you pronounce it? Macaraki band?
Oh, mariachi.
Mariachi.
No, none of that. No, just think sort of Enrique Iglesias kind of stuff, or Shakira, but like, times it by 10, and it's just wonderful rubbish, absolute cheese, but I love it.
Good for you.
Thanks.
Right. Well, what does the world of triathlon hold in store for us this week then?
Oh, well, on this week's show, Rob, we have results because there are a couple of races in Asia, so China and Malaysia. There was the Winter Ball Buster, which I always quite like the sound of, which will bring you results of that as well. And then some news about a few races and an interview with Andy Greenleaf.
Oh, it's a great interview, actually. I'm really excited for you to hear that. He's an absolute legend. Some good stuff coming up then. So where should we start? Should we start over in China?
Yes, let's do it.
So over in China we had go on. Do you want to have a go at pronouncing this? Because I haven't got a clue.
So Ironman 70.3 Xiamen. It was the second race, wasn't it? The second Ironman race in China, and it had Kona qualification on the line for age group winners, didn't it?
Oh yeah, that's right. With 30 slots or 40 slots available.
Something like that.
Big slot allocation. Cool. So it looks like we had a bit of female interest or British interest over on the female side, didn't we, for sure? And also on the male side.
Yeah, we did. In the women's race, Caroline Livesey was racing, as was Paris Edwards. Both of them we've had on the show before.
And also, Emma Pallant was racing, wasn't she?
Yep, Emma Pallant was racing, and she was right up there.
Ended up not finishing, unfortunately.
No. But the women's race was taken out by Jenny Seymour, South Africa, in 4:24. Quite a dominating win, really, ahead of Sarah Piampiano of the US in 4:32, and Lisa Roberts, again of the US, in 4:36. Paris Edwards was fourth in 4:38, and Caroline was 8th female, but I think 7th pro in 4:48.
It looks like it was scorchio hot, doesn't it?
Oh.
It does look hot and humid, and in the background you've got that kind of heat haze.
Yeah, it looks really, really, really hot. And Rob, Emma Pallant had a really, really good swim because she was right out the water alongside Jenny Seymour. So she's really brought on her swim, hasn't she?
Yeah, good news. It'll be interesting to see how she goes over the coming season, won't it? That swim's just been polished off that little bit more.
Yep.
It's going to be deadly. We're going to call her for the World Championships now.
Are you?
We've got to... Yeah, I think so. She's got the run for it.
Yeah.
And if her swim's got to the point she can get out with the lead bikers, she's always been strong on the bike.
Yep.
So she's got to be in with a shout.
Watch this space. Let's hope that she's all right, though, after not being able to finish out in the race in China.
Yeah, indeed. However, in the men's race, it was taken out by Josh Amberg of Australia at 3:56, with Tim Don in second in 3:58, and Justin Metzler from the USA in third in 4:02, with Stu Hayes just missing out on the podium there in fourth in 4:04. So looks like a quick course, doesn't it?
It does look pretty quick, but I was wondering, Rob, some of the swim times looked a little bit slower. Some of the people who you'd expect to go quite a lot faster actually didn't.
Yeah, I mean the pro men taking out sort of 26-minute swims. It's either long or currenty, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. That's it. I think it's something had to be going on. Rob, we should also mention Mark Livesey, who was 11th in the race in 4:26. So that's obviously him stamping his Kona qualification as well. So well done, Mark.
Oh, good work.
Very swift.
Racing in China is full on underway then, it looks like. So shall we head over into Malaysia?
Yes, I think so, where again it was similarly absolutely boiling hot.
Oh, it always is there, isn't it? That's always the one where it's just beyond brutal, isn't it?
It would just be, you just get outside and just sweat, wouldn't you?
Chrissy raced there, didn't she? Did Chrissy win that in her first Ironman?
No, it was, I want to say South Korea.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Still, it was another blitzingly hot and humid one, wasn't it?
Yes, yep. So, in the men's race, it was won by Freddie Cronenberg of Sweden in 8:39, but he's only a few seconds ahead of Thiago Vinhal of Brazil, who was 8:39.45. So yeah, about 30 seconds. And then Kaito Tahura of Japan was third in 8:43. Harry Wiltshire finished 8th, 8:56, and Richie Nichols 10th male in 9:04.
Women's race was taken out by Diane Reisler in 9:25, with Maureen Hoof in 9:35 and Laura Siddle in 9:37. So another good race for Laura there, hey?
Yeah, she had. I think she had. She was in second on the bike, but then was obviously overtaken.
Overhauled, as it were.
Yes, correct.
There's a note here that says there was a male age grouper who apparently rode 15 minutes faster than any of the male pros.
Wow.
That eyebrow-raising amount of time to be ahead, isn't it?
15 minutes?
Yeah, fastest pro time, 4:42. And there's a guy called Nick Bensley of Australia rode 4:27.
Wow.
Which seems fairly quick, doesn't it?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
There's a story there.
I think there might be. Maybe he's a former pro cyclist.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Right, where are we heading to next? We're going to do the Ball Buster.
I think we should do the Ball Buster from the heat of, Eastern Asia to the chilly, horrible climes of, autumnal UK, because it looked absolutely pretty vile, Rob, the weather for the Ball Buster.
Cold and wet. So
yeah.
The Ball Buster uses Box Hill, which for the foreign listeners we've got is the climb they went over about 5 times during the Olympic road race. So it's kind of got 4 switchbacks on it, hasn't it? So you kind of go up and across and up and across and up and across. And in this race you do a lap of Box Hill on the run. You do 3 laps on the bike and then you do another lap on the run. So it's like an 8-mile circuit. Hell, this race is made for you. Made for you. And the race starts on top of the hill. That's the cool thing.
Oh, does it?
Starts on top, so you charge off down the hill with like a 3-mile descent to start with to hammer the quads. Run back up it to get your bike. 3 laps on the bike, and then with your quads in complete bits, you have to run down this hill again, along the flat, and then back up to finish. It's brutal.
Wow. Have you done it, Rob?
I have. I did it. When was the last time I did it? I've done it a few times. 2010 or 2011, I think, was the last time I did it.
Okay. Did you enjoy it?
I'm not sure enjoy is the word. It's a kind of... In the instructions, they say you've got to think of this race like a marathon. And I read that and went, yeah, right, whatever. but afterwards, I was definitely thinking, yeah, they're absolutely right about this. You end up with the same level of knackeredness at the end that you do when you run a marathon, for sure. Really, really sore and tired after it.
Wow.
Yeah, it looks like it was a It's one of these ones where it can be really wet and slippery because of the time of year. There's loads of leaves on the road, and there's lots of very sharp 90-degree bends, and there's a 180-degree bend almost at one point as well. So
Oh, really?
yeah, if it's wet or icy, got a real mix of really fast downhills and then very sharp corners. So there's always like incidents of some sort on it.
Wow. And Rob, isn't our interviewee of the week this week, I know he started it, but I don't think he finished this weekend, but isn't he the record holder as well?
Talks about that in the interview, yeah.
Does he? There you go.
Astonishingly quick over this course. I think he's done 2:30 something, I think.
Amazing.
Yeah, really is an amazing achievement.
Wow. Well, this year it was Gethin Butler who won from Preston Harriers. Won for the 45 to 49 age group there. That's cool, isn't it? 2:48 he did it in. Second was Dan Blake in 2:54.29, and third was Vanrish McLean in 2:54.32. So that must have been a nice little sprint finish on the line. In the women's race, congratulations to Ruth Purbrook, who I know listens to the podcast, so well done, Ruth. She finished in 3:25.50 ahead of Bethan Mail of Brighton Tri Club in 3:26.50, and then Sarah Thomas was third from Serpentine Running Club in 3:27.
I tell you what, it must have been a wet and slippy year, because I don't know if you know this, Gethin Butler is a former like champion British time trialer from super duper time trialer, and he's also like a previous winner of local marathons up here as well. He's a 2:30 something marathon runner, so for him to go 1:09 on the bike, I think it must have been horrendous conditions.
Yeah, still sort of like 3 minutes faster it looks than like, you know, the next quickest person. He actually did, Rob, the Alton Park autumn duathlon when, you know, I did it about 6 weeks ago now, and he was doing the standard because I had done the sprint, and the person who we were standing next to was saying, look out for him, he won't be, you know, in the top few or after that first run, but seriously by the time he's finished the bike he will have like made up loads and loads of distance. So, and he used to race with Chris Boardman, I think.
Yeah, that's right. He was like a seriously good sort of sub 50-minute 25-mile time trialer.
Yeah.
Really good guy.
Nice.
I'd have got fourth there, Hells, if I'd have gone there this year and done my PB.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
7, I think, back in the day.
Good work.
On a dry day.
Yeah.
And dry day, I did it in 2. So we're going to compare it directly.
Yeah, why not? Do it. You should always compare.
Yeah, I'll go back in time in my TARDIS and claim 4th place.
Well, definitely one to look at for if you want a tough duathlon.
But next year, you'll be in really good shape. This time next year.
Will I?
Honestly, you would love it. It's the perfect race for you. Long, hilly duathlon. It'd be brilliant.
Oh, I need to get some hills in my legs, Rob.
It'd be fine.
Just need to get some hills in my legs.
You'll be fine, mate. Get down and do it. Get it done.
Yes.
Shall we head on over to Coach's Couch?
Yes, let's do that. Question in from Johnny Wildball, who says, into the shed for the winter trainer road plan or races on Zwift? Will I benefit from one more than the other? And Rob, Johnny says, I have a kicker. Now, I don't know what a kicker is, so you're going to have to explain that as well.
Kicker's a fancy turbo, Helen. That's what
right.
It is.
Are they any better than a non-fancy turbo?
Yeah, well, they've got built-in power meter, and they can be controlled by your computer. So with things like Trainer Road and Zwift, you can tell the trainer what power you want to put out, and it'll control the resistance for you.
Oh, that sounds quite flashy.
Oh yeah, it's very flashy.
Yeah.
Really. And so for things like Zwift, if you're going uphill in the computer program, it'll automatically adjust how hard it is for you to pedal.
Okay.
Stick. I'm
Wow.
not sure whether it's the kind of thing that you would enjoy, if you know what I mean. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean it in a kind of, you've got to be into technology and enjoy the sensation of the resistance changing around you, whereas I think you enjoy having your eyes closed and listening to
Mexican cheesy pop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on a normal turbo, I still change clearly I change resistance,
Yeah.
but I guess I do that myself.
Yeah, totally. So this just links to the computer, and whenever anything's happening on screen, when you go uphill, it'll become harder to pedal, just like it is in the outdoor world.
Okay.
Got a power meter to it as well, so it'll give you a power reading on the screen of how much power you're pushing out without you. So the power meter's in the turbo rather than in your bike.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what would be the benefits then, Rob, of...
Well, it sounds like he's got a pretty high-tech shed for starters, doesn't it?
I think so. Wouldn't mind one of them instead of just the secateurs and the lawnmower.
Oh man, so I think the big thing that I'm always a big exponent of is following a structured training plan. And Trainer Road will definitely have the edge there, because although racing on Zwift will be really good fun, and you can argue it is going to get you fitter because you're working really hard in the races, I don't think there's any substitute for following really well structured training plan during your winter. And I know the stuff in Trainer Road is really well designed, and it pretty much follows the same idea as what I've been talking on here. You've got to do some intervals based around your FTP. Those intervals are going to sequentially get either longer, or the recoveries are going to get shorter as the winter goes on. The net result being that you're going to end the winter with your FTP higher and you being a stronger rider than you started the winter. Now, the races on Zwift are going to be really good fun, but I just don't think it's going to have the same effect. It certainly won't be as specific to your training as it would be following a training plan. So personally, what I do is I've got my training plan written out in front of me, and I go on Zwift because I enjoy the kind of aspect of having people around me on there, and I use them to chase them down, and I'm doing my effort and I try and catch the group up, and then I do my recovery and let the group ride away and kind of use the group that way. But what I've found when you're just racing in Zwift is you're either working really hard on the front, or you're just sitting up and not really doing anything with your little cyclist avatar in the pack. A bit like road racing is in the real world, to be honest.
Yeah, when you see them and you think, oh, I could probably be in that pack. They're not doing anything.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much how it works in the computerized world as well. If you're not at the front of the group trying to drive it on, then you're pretty much not putting a huge amount of effort out. So, yeah, if you're going to use Zwift, you've got to be smart with it. And I think it's a great thing. I've done some really high threshold testing by using the races there and using the group to motivate me on. But I think you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck by following a structured training plan over the winter.
Good answer.
There we go.
Good answer. Shall we move on to this week's interview of the week, Rob?
Yeah, so this week's interview, we've got Andy Greenleaf, who is without doubt one of the UK's most successful age groupers. He's finished 5th in his age group at Kona. He's won the overall age group title at 70.3 Wimbleball and Staffordshire, and at Ironman Wales in 2015, where he finished 5th overall. So I had a great chat and a catch up with him. So let's stick the interview on now. Andy Greenleaf, welcome to the Cup of Triathlon podcast. Thank you very much for agreeing to join us, mate. How are you doing today?
Well, thanks very much for having me along. And I'm doing good. So just taking a bit of time out to have a chat with you guys.
Taking a little bit of well-earned time out after the season you've had as well, mate. I don't think there's a more successful British age group triathlete this year than you. So how does it feel getting to the end of a long season like this? Have you just been enjoying chilling out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I've pretty much been going non-stop since pretty much the very start of the year. And only having got back from Kona a month ago have I started to ease off a little bit. Although it's a little bit tricky to ease off completely, as I kind of don't really like to be too restless. But it's nice having no pressures, and I've pretty much drawn a line under 2016. So get cracking again come January next year. But in the meantime, I'm just happy to take a bit of time out.
You're going to kick back a little bit, are you, in the meantime? That's good. So listen, I'm gonna introduce your results over the year, actually, because I was doing a bit of reading up about you in preparation for the interview, and I've got to say, as Palmaras go for the year, you were first age grouper overall at 70.3 Staffordshire and 70.3 Wimbleball in the UK. You were second age grouper overall and fourth overall at Dublin 70.3, and you were first age grouper overall at Ironman Wales 2015, which qualified you obviously for Kona this year. So what an amazing season, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't really have asked for all that much more this year. I mean, I started the start of the season was mostly focused on running as I was training up for the London Marathon, and actually, I'll admit I didn't do all that much cycling in the first few months of the year, just concentrating on the marathon. But I found that gave me a really good base. And then come May, I started to increase the mileage on the bike. And then my first race must have been Staffordshire, which I think was mid-June. And things just kept picking up from there. And yeah, I've had some good races this year and some results that I'm very pleased with. And I find my favourite distance is probably the 70.3. But obviously this year was the big build up to Kona.
Yeah, sure. So listen, let me take you back a little bit. You mentioned your crack at the London Marathon earlier in the year. Tell the listeners what time you managed to record at London.
So this year I did just over 2 hours 25.
Wow.
Which I was pleased with. It wasn't quite as quick as last year, but I went out on the day hoping to get a PB. But actually, I kind of made a decision quite early on that it was probably not a PB day. But I just gave it my best and tried to run as even pace as possible. So I was pleased with that.
And your PB, is it 2:21? Is that right, from the year before?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
So in terms of like your history and your background, athletics wise, did you do something as a kid? Were you a runner or a cyclist or a swimmer or a combination of all three as a kid?
Well, when I was very young, my parents would take me swimming, and I used to swim in a local club in Winchester where I grew up, but that was only up to about the age of 10. After which point I pretty much gave up swimming for the next 10 years.
Okay.
But then my father, he was into athletics when he was growing up, and he would take me along to local races in and around Hampshire, and I joined Winchester and District Athletics Club, where I was a member for about 20 years. And so throughout my teenage years, I would do cross countries and the odd road race. And I competed up to county standard, and then went to university, and I guess kind of saw how other people began to train. There were a couple of guys there who'd got GB vests, and I was very impressed by the intervals and the sessions and the number of miles that they did in a week. But it wasn't until I moved to London, having graduated from university, that I started to get into groups which were, I guess, running sessions which were more suited to what I do, which is the longer stuff.
Yeah.
And so now, I mean, my training generally is focused around running, particularly during the winter. And then I incorporate the swimming and the cycling during the summer, because basically I enjoy doing the triathlon as well.
Yeah, got you. So do you think of yourself as a runner who dabbles in triathlon, or have you kind of made that shift in your head to I am now a triathlete, having basically won everything there is to win this?
Well, I mean, I love cycling and I love running. Swimming is a bit of a battle for me. I used to swim when I first moved to London. I picked up sort of swimming a lot more, and I used to swim every day for about 5 years. But more recently, I find I just enjoy going out on the bike in Richmond Park or in Reed out in Surrey, and I find it a bit difficult to get myself to the swimming pool. So
I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I probably get some good results running, but equally now I just love the triathlon as well.
Yeah, sure. And the fact that you had such a background in swimming as a kid, you probably developed very good stroke mechanics as a child, and then you know, the aerobic fitness you've got from your cycling and your running, I imagine, really helps carry that over into the swimming, and a bit of focus for you will have you in the position where you're coming out of the water in the lead pack in your age group, right?
Well, I mean, that would be the hope for next year. I think I probably need to do some swim sessions over the next few months to help that.
Well, let's get your perspective on this. As a, you know, obviously from an outsider looking in, it's easy to look at you and go, you're the complete package, you know, you've won all these races. But do you think of yourself as having stronger disciplines and weaker disciplines? Presumably, do you feel that your swimming's a bit weaker than your running and your biking are?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly, I don't ever envisage myself coming out of the swim right at the front. And I do really struggle in the swim relative to the other disciplines. I raced one of the I raced two of the Castle triathlons this year, and one of them I pushed the swim incredibly hard. Was very pleased with it, but as a result, I struggled a bit more on the bike. So, I mean, I find that I can and sort of channel my best performances on the bike and the run discipline. So I'll leave a bit more energy for that.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm fortunate in that I've come from a running background. So if there are people to chase down on the run, then, you know, I've kind of got a chance to do that. And that's a strategy which I've employed quite a few times this year.
Got you. And that, it's interesting that, you know, because a lot of people come across the fact that if they swim just a little bit easier in terms of effort, it makes the bike and the run much easier. And conversely, if they swim just a bit harder, it has a massive negative impact on either or the bike and the run.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, one of the things that I really like about 70.3 is that I find that I can race it all the way to the end, as opposed to what I found with an Ironman, where, you know, towards the end of the run, you're literally just hanging on to get through to the end.
Yeah.
So certainly when I've approached the 70.3s, I've wanted to leave enough in the tank to be able to chase down anybody who might be in front of me, or basically just do justice on the run.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. It's great to hear somebody from your sort of high level of performance having come across a strategy that we recommend with a lot of age groupers, which is that if you want to get the best overall performance in terms of triathlon, sometimes you've got to back one of the disciplines off a little bit in order to not have a negative effect sort of later on. Yeah,
absolutely. Although I guess now with some of the changes they've got in the rules, like particularly with the sprint distance, where I believe they're now starting to open it more to draft legal races in the bike.
Yeah.
For someone like myself, who's a weaker swimmer and wouldn't necessarily make the front pack, that style of race really doesn't suit me quite so well.
Yeah.
I remember I raced the London Triathlon in the elite race a couple of years ago, and I was so far off the back of the pack on the swim that I just didn't get any benefit gains from the drafting on the bike. Yeah, so that's why the middle distance and the long distance races I think are much more suitable to someone like myself.
Yeah, cool. So listen, we mentioned earlier on that you'd won 70.3 Staffs and 70.3 Wimbleball this year. How was your experience at Wimbleball after, it would have been a couple of weeks after racing Staffordshire, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I loved it. And I think the course at Wimbleball I'd been recommended to do by a few friends because, I mean, I'm reasonably good on hills, and obviously it's a very undulating course.
Undulating is an understatement for it, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a single stretch of flat on that whole course for 90 kilometres.
I don't think so. You're either going up or down. But I mean, I absolutely loved the whole experience, and it turned out to be a sort of an interesting race. Because obviously I came out the swim probably in about 20th and then worked my way through to the front of the bike before Brian Fogarty came flying past. And I think he had in the back of his mind that he knew I was fairly handy on the run, and so he had to put as much distance between myself and him as possible. So then it came down to a bit of a race on the run. and unfortunately I reeled him in. But it's a cracking race, and I certainly really enjoyed it, and I'd definitely go back and do it again.
It really is one of those classic races for anyone around the world to come and do, isn't it? That it's so challenging on the bike. There really isn't any way you can sit up and relax. It's pushing the whole way, and then the run is almost as brutal as the bike is, isn't it?
Absolutely. Like we drove the bike course the day before, just because I wanted to make sure I was comfortable with the hills and some of the descents, but I hadn't actually recce'd the run course. And after about 2 miles on the first lap, they send you up a great big hill. Yeah. And I think after 3 hours or so, or 3.5 hours of exercise, that's not really what you need. And then you have to do it 3 times.
Yeah.
So, but I guess in that respect, it's about not going out basically not going out on the run too hard, and just gradually just pushing up the hills gently, so it doesn't really take too much out of you, and then use the descents to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk about another race as well with you. Your race at Ironman Wales, talking about hilly, undulating races. The race you had there in 2015. Can you talk us through your experience of how you approached racing at Ironman Wales?
Well, Ironman Wales was a bit of an interesting one for me, because I'd never actually planned to do it until very late on in the season. I went to do the 70.3 World Champs and basically got disqualified for a mistake on the bike. And
I read about this. What was the situation that led you to be disqualified there?
Well, I was about 5 miles from the end of the bike, and was very pleased by how the race was going, and I was reasonably close to the front. And there was a descent which was quite a narrow descent, and obviously in Europe you have to drive and ride on the right hand side, and it was quite a windy road, and I took what I thought was the safest route, which was basically down the middle of the road. And unbeknown to me, even though it was closed roads, you had to stay on the right hand side of the road, and I just crept over the middle line just as a draft buster was behind me. So I was carded straight away, and as a result, very frustrated.
Oh, that's a nightmare for you.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a rule that I'm very familiar with at the moment. Basically as a result of that. But these things happen, and you just have to pick yourself up and kind of get on with it. And I'd done a whole season of training basically for the 70.3 World Champs, and I wanted to basically get a result out of the end of it. And so after that race, I spoke with Richard Mellick, who runs Free Speed, and we were talking about what my plans were for next year. And one of the things that I was looking to do was to go to Kona, and he suggested trying to get an early qualification. And with Wales only 2 weeks later, it seemed like an obvious place to do it. And I was a little bit hesitant, the fact that I'd not even ridden more than probably about 90 miles in a single ride last year up to that point. But I basically approached it with no sort of not too much pressures. It hadn't been my A race of the season, and the goal of it was basically to pick up a qualification spot for Kona. So I got a spot and went down to Tembe, and it was probably one of my favourite races to have actually done. The crowd support there was unbelievable. The whole of the town comes out, and I think I've heard that from many other competitors who competed there.
That's amazing, isn't it? It's so incredible that, especially in the run in the sort of the run in the village itself is just, it's insane. Definitely. And it's a race that, it went well for me that day, but it would be one which I'd certainly be very happy to go back and do again.
But yeah, the cycle course was very, very suited to me. It was undulating, and I think because of the way that I'd approached the race, which was not necessarily to race it really hard from the start, I was able to ride a relatively consistent bike leg, and then I got onto the run, and basically just ran as consistently as possible, knowing from previous experience in my only ever Ironman before that, which was if you go out far too quick, then you're going to find it very, very painful in the second half. So I finished, and I finished 5th overall, which I was delighted with.
I've got to say, I was actually down in Tenby supporting that day, and I remember you running by and just thinking that you looked so strong, and that's reflected in your marathon time. It was 2:55 you ran, so it was the third fastest run of the day, and only a couple of minutes behind the overall winner, Jesse Thomas, which totally underlines your run caliber, doesn't it? But I love to hear that you approached it as I'm going to go out as a steady run here, because I know it's going to be murder later on if I go out too hard.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the end of 2015. That was my second Ironman. I'd actually done an Ironman in 2010 down in Nice. Okay, and it was basically a challenge that myself and five other friends from university had said that we do an Ironman by 2010, and I remember getting onto Nice Promenade and starting the run, feeling very comfortable running along at about 2:40 marathon pace.
Thinking, I don't know what all the fuss is about.
And then halfway through, I basically just ran out of steam. And finished with a very large positive split. So, I mean, even that experience, which was before I, started to do the longer distance stuff more seriously, I was able to take that into my race in Wales, just to know not to go out too hard and just try and pace it as consistently as possible.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting to remember that your 2:55 is 35 minutes slower than your PB. Marathon. So although it looks lightning fast by Ironman standards, it is still that big proportional gap slower than what you would be able to run fresh, essentially. Yeah,
and I think certainly, I mean, now I've done, I guess, 3 Ironman races, and it's very apparent to myself that running a marathon at the end of an Ironman, where you're incredibly fatigued before you even start, is very different to racing a standalone marathon, where you're basically running at threshold pace for 26 miles, say in the London Marathon, as opposed to running marathon at the end of an Ironman, where you're very much just trying to keep your heart rate quite low. And it's not so much a race, more just sort of hanging on there.
Well, so let me ask this, and when you're out for a sort of an easy pace run in training, would that be about the same pace as your 2:55 marathon off the bike?
I would say, I mean, I've been quite renowned for doing a lot of my runs, even my steady runs, relatively quick.
Okay.
So, I mean, a lot of even my long runs will generally be run at about 6-minute mile pace.
Right, interesting.
Yeah, which would sort of equate to, sort of 2:35, 2:40. There's perhaps a few skeptics about that. I mean, you don't, it's not necessarily correct that you should be going out and blitzing every single run that you do. But I just find that's always the way that I have run. And I seem to find it works relatively okay for me.
And it's also worth remembering, isn't it, that's still that 2:36 to 2:40 marathon pace is, 16 to 20 minutes slower than your actual marathon race pace, let alone anything else. So it isn't fast running by your standards, is it?
No, I mean, I would say it's comfortable running, and for me, it's running at a pace which I could hold a conversation.
Yeah.
I guess the danger is if you do more than, say, 50, if I'm training for marathons, then if you do more than, say, 15 to 17 miles at that sort of pace, then it can impact some of your training sessions in the following days.
Yeah.
And particularly in the build up for a marathon, I would prefer to hit most of my training sessions feeling relatively fresh and ready to go quite hard at them, as opposed to spending every week on week completely fatigued.
Yeah. Listen, let me ask you a little bit about training, because the listeners would kill me if we didn't kind of dive into this a little bit. First up, how is your run training different when you're training for an Ironman marathon than it is for when you're training for a standalone marathon? What differences do you make there?
It's an interesting one, because it's actually not that different.
Okay.
I mean, I kind of have to look at my training as both the running, all the running, the swimming, and the cycling. I find that I rather do a spring marathon. I've always done a spring marathon in the past, and so that's a build up from the beginning of January, and January, February, March, April will pretty much be all running with very, very little cycling and swimming.
Right.
I'll probably land up doing maybe a watt bike session during the week, and maybe a swim, but the majority will either be steady runs to and from work, or I'll do interval sessions on a Tuesday, which are shorter, which might come to about 10Ks worth of effort, then longer intervals on a Thursday, which might come up to about 20Ks worth of effort, and then a long run on a Sunday, which is anything up to about 20 miles. And then interdispersed in all of that is just a load of steady running, which for me is generally to and from work.
Gotcha. And how many times a week will you run in the build up to your Ironman marathon then?
Well, in a build up to an Ironman, some of those double days, which I might be doing while I'm building up to a standalone marathon, will be replaced by a cycle or a swim. So perhaps during the winter, whilst I might only be doing, say, 1 or maximum 2 cycles per week, during the summer, I would try and get out on the bike every day. And so the sort of the quality run sessions, certainly on a Tuesday and on a Sunday, I don't really stop. But that Thursday night long threshold interval session would generally be replaced by a bike interval session.
Right, gotcha. So you'll run a bit less in the approach to your Ironman, but it sounds like you keep the intensity there pretty much year round.
Yeah, pretty much, which I think is why I'm quite tired now.
Oh yeah, that's the killer, isn't it? Do you work with a coach as part of Team Free Speed?
No. I've always through my
self-coached, have you?
Right through my running career, I've been self-coached. We get coached. My group, which runs in Battersea Park on a Tuesday, we have somebody who comes down and coaches us, and that's very much just setting the session, whether it's however the 10K worth of reps are made up. He will set what that session should be, whether it's a 10K session or a 5K session or But certainly the longer runs and any of the cycling, it's all just things that I basically want to do. And I feel as though as long as I do a hard bike session and a hard run session, then that seems to work for me.
Gotcha. And in terms of a sort of a coaching relationship and advice and stuff, it sounds like you've got that kind of relationship with Richard Mellick, who manages the team, in terms of advising and going backwards and forwards about ideas. Would that be right, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's incredibly knowledgeable about the triathlon scene and which races to do, and I guess trying to get me to race as best as possible on the day itself.
Yeah. So it sounds like you have got that kind of, I suppose coaching is the wrong phrase here, but that the mentoring kind of relationship with someone to bounce ideas off with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's more. He's good at giving a direction as to perhaps what I should be thinking about doing during the season. I mean, I only really started to do triathlon to a higher level in the last 2 or 3 years, and so I'm kind of relatively new to which particular races to target, whether it's over racing or under racing. So just having a little bit of direction is incredibly valuable. And then obviously being on the team as well, it's great to be able to go to various races and have a bunch of teammates there as well.
It does sound like you've got a really good setup in terms of maybe not seeing people a lot, but when you go to races, I'm trying to think who we've had from Free Speed on the show. We've had Charlie on and Paul Burton and Jane Hansom as well. So do you find you're all from a kind of similar mindset in terms of what you want to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I guess Jane and Paul aren't on Free Speed, but I think, I just got to know them from going to races and train. I train a little bit with Paul, certainly on the bike. But yeah, just having people who you're familiar with is incredibly useful.
Yeah. And would you talk a little bit about, I mean, I'm fascinated by the idea of Team Free Speed, and that it seems to be really well set up, and as athletes you're really well supported by the team in general. What sort of benefits have you found it's brought to you?
Well, we have some really good sponsors. So, I mean, we get our trainers through Skechers, and we have gym membership through Virgin Active, and Cliff give us nutrition, and Precision Hydration help us with the electrolytes, as well as a number of other sponsors as well. And just having those extra things to facilitate your training, and support from various sort of triathlon running nutrition companies, they all just help make an athlete's life a bit easier as well.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when, a lot of you are aiming to end up and, winning races and getting to Kona. And that's the thing we've got to talk about before we let you go, isn't it? Your race at Kona this year, having just finished on the podium there. Tell us about your experience, man.
Oh, I thought it was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. And I think not just the race, but the whole Kona experience was something which I'd never thought it would be like before. I mean, it's obviously in Hawaii, which is an incredible place to visit. But the lead up was great to be able to just hang out with other triathletes and swim every day at the pier, and meet a whole load of other, whether it's sponsors or other triathletes and competitors, is just incredible. And then obviously the race itself was, well, you're taking the top triathletes from all around the world, which is, like when I've competed in the triathlons in the UK, there are obviously a handful of good triathletes. There's some sort of very good triathletes, who obviously get selected to go to Kona. But if that's taking place from all of the individual Ironman races around the world, you then land up with a very high standard of competition. And it put me in a slightly different position to what I'm used to, where, I came out of the swim in 500th position. Wow. And so I have 500 odd people to try and get past on the bike, which is an experience that I've never ever had before.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you about. How was that for you, coming out of the water with so many people in front of you? You got the full-on age groupers experience there, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, I went into the race with my own plan, which was to swim approximately an hour, to cycle approximately 5 hours, and to run as close or below 3 hours for the marathon as possible. And I'd seen the results from years before, where an hour swim would put you in, about 500th place. And so I came out on the bike, and actually I'd had a bit of had some advice from Paul, who said that, in the early stage of the bike, you should try and basically make as many positions as possible before you get out onto the Queen K. So I pushed it fairly hard for the first 7 or 8 kilometers, and probably went past 150 people. And then when we got onto the Queen K, that's when I guess there were the large cycle groups, which you just can't get away from when there are so many people all swimming and riding at exactly the same speed.
Yeah.
But for me, I'd been so paranoid about obviously being disqualified the previous year that I just didn't want any time penalty or reason for disqualification. So I was just very wary of keeping my distance behind the person in front. And I got about an hour into the race, and I'd been sat towards the back of a group, and decided that I'd try and push my way through and work my way through the field. And at the time I felt great, and I was moving through, and I was feeling really good. And I got about 15 miles from the end of the bike, and I don't know whether it was due to maybe not taking enough food on the bike, or just generally becoming a little bit more fatigued, but the last 15 miles I found incredibly tough. And I was just I was just waiting for the run to start and hoping that once I got onto the run, I'd get some energy back. So actually, for that last bit of the bike, I kind of just took stock and took it a little bit easier before getting onto the run. And then the run, I took that strategy of going out relatively easy. And so I think I say relatively easy. I think I started out at about 2:55 pace, which is obviously what I'd run in Wales. Which I think it goes back to what you said earlier, that's still substantially slower to what I'm used to running. But I mean, the temperature is probably about 30 degrees. And so I was just mindful that as long as I was working through the field, then and running within my what I was capable of, I thought that was the best way to do it. So I just made sure I also took on plenty of ice and water and Coke, and basically any of the things that they had at the aid stations. And actually up to about 18 miles, I felt really, really good, and I was working through the field, and I got myself up to about I think around about 20th coming out of the energy lab. At which point I rejoined the Queen K and just really started to struggle. And then it was just a case of, right, you've only got sort of 4 or 5 miles left. Just sit in and just race sensibly. And I looked behind me, and I couldn't see anyone for quite a distance back. And I looked in front of me, and the next person was far, far too far in front that I would be able to catch them. And so I was just happy to sit in and just try and hold my position to the end. And that seemed to work absolutely fine until about 200 meters from the end, when someone came past me.
Oh, no.
And I remember the story from last year where Charlie Pennington just got edged out by someone in his category by only a handful of seconds. And I was like, oh, maybe he was in my category as well. So I turned on a sprint for the finish, and fortunately I got my position back. But I couldn't be more relieved to see that finish line.
And was the guy in your age group?
He turned out to be in the age group above, but little did I know that the next person in my age group was only 14 seconds behind me. So wow. It certainly does.
A difference with you getting on the podium or not, wouldn't it?
Exactly. It sort of comes down to the wire. So I think the sprint finish was actually needed.
Wow. And so what's next for you then? What have you got planned for the coming season?
So at the moment, I'll do a spring marathon, and then I hope to try and get an early qualification for Kona next year. So I haven't fully confirmed which race I'm planning to try and qualify at, but I mean, certainly from my experience this year, I'd like to be able to have at least, sort of 4 or 5 weeks off a qualification Ironman to basically take stock and then restart the training again.
Yeah.
To, arrive in Kona 2017 in best shape as possible.
And is the dream to win it then? Is that what that's what fighting?
That would be the dream. Aim
Good.
high,
I say it out loud, man. There's no reason you can't do it. Let's get it on the board now. You heard it first.
I'll aim high. I'll aim high and see if I can try and get there.
Oh, well, listen, mate. Thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you coming on the show, and perhaps we can get you back on next year, and hopefully you'll be world champion then. Hey.
Well, fingers crossed if all goes to plan. But thanks very much for having me on the show.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot. So there's Andy, definitely a proponent of the hard intervals all the way through the winter.
It's good to know, isn't it?
Yeah. He's a talented guy, 2:21 marathon runner, as well as swimming well and biking well as well. It's incredible, isn't it?
That is awesome. I read his blog the other day from Kona. It was a good read, and I like the fact that he did go out there to enjoy it as well as to race as well as he could, if that makes sense. So he didn't sort of go and be a hermit and say, no, I want to do amazingly in this race, therefore I'm not going to, get involved in anything. He said that he didn't know if he'd ever go out there again, so, once in a lifetime opportunity, and then still came away with a fruit bowl.
Yeah, he sounds like a pretty well balanced athlete all round, doesn't he?
Yeah.
An all-round good guy. So yeah, I'd love to see him. He sort of says he's going to go back there with the aim of trying to take the title, whether it's next year or the year after. So yeah, watch this space.
It's exciting. It's an exciting space to watch.
Right, let's do a bit of triathlon news, Hells. Let's talk about what's going on around the world.
Yep. So first of all, Rob, Ironman France has been confirmed for 2017, and it is going to be on Sunday, July the 23rd, which is a week after Ironman UK. There had just been a little bit of doubt about it because of the terror attack in Nice last July. So
yeah, they decided there wasn't going to be any events at all for a whole year, didn't they? So they've moved the date back this year out of respect for the families.
Yep.
But it's really good to see that race is still going to go ahead. It's an iconic race. It's, as you know, it was adapted from the original Nice long distance race.
Yep.
It should be on your bucket list for sure, Helen. It's a brilliant event.
It does look pretty stunning because you've got, the bike course is really tough, isn't it? And you loads of hills to climb, but then the run, you're out on Nice seafront.
It's brilliant. Yeah, you get a real contrast of, starting in this massive town, and within an hour's worth of riding, you're just out into the mountains, and it feels like you're absolutely in the middle of nowhere. And then a few hours later, you're back on the seafront again, and the run at Nice is a real killer because the promenade is it isn't straight, it kind of bends around in a curve.
Yeah.
But when you get to the far end by the airport, you turn around and you can see the casino in the distance. Opposite the finish line. And it just looks so far away.
Oh, it's that mental game, isn't it?
Oh, it's only 5 kilometres, but you look at it and you go, every time it happened on each of the 4 laps, I was going, that can't be right. It's got to be 5 kilometres at very least. Or 20 kilometres to that domed roof on top of the casino.
Oh, it's like if you're running across a really, really long beach and you just think, I'm never going to get to the other side.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Yeah, you're just thinking, oh man, it looks so far away, and gradually it gets closer and a little bit closer. And then, keep on moving and you do eventually get there.
So it's great to see that that's still going to go ahead.
Yep. Rob, another thing worth mentioning is that, because we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, the British Triathlon Awards dinner, which was the weekend just gone. And I actually got an invite to this, Rob.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did in the end, but I couldn't go because I had a wedding reception to go to. But anyway, so we didn't go, but I can tell you that The Olympic Athlete of the Year award went to Alistair Brownlee. He also got the British Triathlon Male Elite Triathlete of the Year. Vicky Holland, who we had on the show, was named Female Elite Triathlete of the Year. Andy Lewis was the Male Para-Triathlete of the Year. He got gold at the Rio Paralympics. And Alison Patrick and her guide Hazel were named the Female Para-Triathlete of the Year. And then, Rob, three more to mention. I'm going to mention three more. Tim Don got the Elite Long Distance Triathlete of the Year. I'm sure you'd like to think there were quite a number of other males who could have got that as well. And Jodie Swallow was the Female Elite Long Distance Triathlete of the Year. And Emma Pooley was the Female Elite Duathlete of the Year, which is quite impressive given that she went to the Olympics as well to do, the cycling.
Given that she did most of the year just doing cycling.
Totally.
Yeah, I wonder which races they used to decide the long distance ones.
Yeah, don't know. It would be It would be good to know, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be interesting, that one. Cool, good work. Right then, in other news, we have got the Challenge Family Bonus money's been announced, hasn't it?
It has, and I saw this, Rob, and I thought, actually, there is a bit of an incentive there, isn't there, for pro athletes to do some of the challenge events in Europe.
Oh yeah, definitely. With like 25 grand on the nose for first, 17 for second, etc. That's a lot of money there, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's probably as much as, probably not third in Kona, but fourth, fifth, something like that. It's well worth the money.
Yeah. So basically, they have this €140,000 end of season bonus, which they divvy up, don't they, to people who've raced in the challenge family events, and that is in addition to the €38,000 prize money per race. So yeah, Chris Fisher of Denmark got the bonus €25,000, and it goes down to fifth. Per Bittner was fifth, so he gets €5,000 for his efforts. And then in the women's, it was Miriam Veerd, Yvonne van Vlerken, who we've had on the show, got second, so she would get €17,000.
Yeah, it's a nice little payday, and I think it's cool that they announced it at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So, like, here we go, you've done this, it's been a season-long competition, and €140,000 is a lot of cash, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And then once you've divvied up, it's not quite so much, but, if you're not expecting it, then, yeah, €25,000, you wouldn't say no to that, would you?
Yeah, very nice. And it makes me wonder whether they've got something in the pipeline for, their half-distance championship. It's going to be on next year. Prize money-wise, it looks like they've got some very generous sponsors and prize givers there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. It'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about that, wouldn't it? We should. I think we should. I think we should look into that one.
Yeah. See if we can get Zibby on the show.
Yes. Right. I'll put it on my to-do list, Rob.
Your to-do list that's currently stretching I'm imagining it like a roll of toilet paper. Across the floor and...
Yeah, and then I write things on there which I know I can definitely do, so that I can still cross them off.
You do that thing where the first thing you write is write to-do list.
No, I didn't do that, but I did put empty the dishwasher, which clearly I'm going to do. I'm not going to leave that, am I? But there you go. Anyway, Rob, you said last week to me, you be on it on your head, it be it on your head, Helen, if I go and do cross country.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I went and did it.
Tell us about the cross country this weekend, Helen.
It was very muddy, Rob.
Was it the nice, dry, firm underfoot cross country of the week before, or was it a
no
experience?
It was very, very different, and I have never ever run through that much mud in my life. It looked like I was wearing leggings at the end of it, and I took my socks off. And it's like these glowing white things at the bottom of my leg, and everywhere else was just absolutely covered in mud. There was one point, and there was definitely a camera on this corner, because clearly they knew that people were going to go flying, and I really nearly lost it, but thankfully I just managed to hold on and not fall flat on my face. But I saw some guys running past in the men's race, and I was like, oh my god, they've clearly face planted, just like their whole face was covered in mud.
Photographs that I saw just looked beyond beastly, and people were running like right at the edge of the path. Like,
but what's the point in that?
Try and not fall over.
Yeah, seriously, there's no point in that. You're going to get covered in mud. Like your feet got soaked within about, well, even just warming up. It's like, oh, okay, wet feet, fine, cold feet, yep. And then it was just ridiculously muddy.
Good for you, mate, for getting out there and doing it.
Thanks, I did it. Yep, it's good fun.
Read you to wrap the show up. This is nice. We've had an email from a listener in New York. This is from Ben Kessel, and it says, just want to say thanks very much for the show this week. We're heartbroken in New York about the election, and listening to your show is such an uplifting and refreshing experience. It breathes a little bit of life back into the air. So isn't that nice?
Oh, that is very, very nice. Thanks, Ben.
Our American listeners out there, keep your chins up, because it's been a pretty disgusting week for them, hasn't it, really? Yeah. So keep your chins up, keep training. It'll all be all right.
The new tri season will come around very quickly.
Yeah, channel that annoyance and upset and fear into a turbo session this week from us.
You'll nail it.
Yeah, hopefully so. All right, let's wrap the show up, Hells. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. We are the Cup of Triathlon podcast. I'm Rob Wilby.
I'm Helen Murray.
And until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week, and we'll speak to you again then. Cheers now.